Well, it's officially happened. Hey, what's up everyone, it's me, SpeedSuperSonic, it's another video. In this video today, it is time, it's our final installment in the Sonic being sold to a new movie studio company saga. It's been crazy. If you guys somehow aren't aware of what's been going on for really the past half year, let me break it down for you real quick. Paramount is of course the distributor behind the Sonic the Hedgehog film franchise. It's been incredibly successful for them, profitable for them. It's pretty public knowledge at this point that it's Paramount who runs this whole ship when it comes to the Sonic movies. But for the longest time, not just since the Sonic movies started, Paramount has been in trouble. They haven't been as stable as a lot of their competitors like Disney or Universal or yes, even Warner Brothers, who was merged recently. The ship hasn't been incredibly steady for them, so there's been a lot of talk about the fact that they essentially need to, at this point, merge with another company, whether that be one of their competitors or a completely different company in general. Over the next few years, Paramount would eventually have to change and would not be the same company. And towards the very end of last year, it was looking almost imminent. That initially started with discussions with Warner Brothers, which we discussed. That was the first time we really talked about it on this channel. And then months went by, that Warner Brothers deal fell through, and then boom, they entered some negotiating window with Skydance Media. That negotiating window closed, and it looked like Sony was bound to come in and swoop up Paramount for $26 billion in cash and potentially even sweeten the deal later on. I was pretty sold on the fact that it was going to happen, and the Sonic movie franchise would then by proxy be owned by Sony Pictures, which was a scary prospect. But only like a few days after it came out that Sony was actually kind of stepping back from their offer on Paramount, not because of the money or anything, but because they initially wanted to break Paramount up. Paramount is a bunch of different things, not just Paramount Pictures. They have CBS, which is an entire conglomerate network company, Comedy Central and Nickelodeon, of course. There's Paramount Plus, their streaming service. There's so many layers to Paramount. Sony didn't want to have all of that, as Sony is not at all interested in streaming. Well, the $26 billion is of course enticing and much bigger than Skydance's $5 billion, like it's not even comparable. It seems like Paramount doesn't want to go through with that, as recently it has been announced that they are going forward with their deal with Skydance, who revised their offer and is now $8 billion, which is still significantly less, not even half of what Sony offered. But the thing is that Skydance doesn't plan on breaking up the company, which means that Paramount is essentially going to stay relatively the same. There's of course going to be, new CEOs, new people working for it, but as a whole, Paramount isn't going to shift all that much. The studio will still remain, it will still be called Paramount, but that doesn't mean there are going to be no changes whatsoever, obviously. This is still a big merger. And of course, our question goes to, where does the Sonic franchise go from here, which is now one of Paramount's, if not Paramount's, biggest hot ticket item. Well, when we're looking at Skydance Media, it's a little different than a Sony, for instance, because Skydance, well, yes, has been producing movies for a while. They also have a gaming division, they also have an animation studio. They're a relative more recent studio. So honestly, there's not really a lot you can point towards at Skydance that would indicate a direction for Sonic. If any of you guys are wondering about the Skydance Games thing, that is gonna have no impact on Sonic whatsoever. Sonic's involvement with Paramount is strictly movie, TV related. That's it. I think a Skydance game from them would be cool, but I don't see that happening. I've been saying this for a while. I don't think there's too much reason to worry when it comes to Sonic or any future plans they have in the works. I definitely think a lot of Paramount's other franchises have room to worry right now, but in terms of Sonic, I think it's the opposite. Sonic has, since its inception, and there's really no bias here, been just a massive success for the company in ways that a lot of their other franchises just haven't been delivering on a consistent basis. Every single thing has aimed and surpassed what they wanted it to be. The first Sonic movie, then the sequel obviously surpassing that and making more money. And even the Knuckles TV show, which I know the fan base in particular didn't like, but a lot of critics, audiences, myself enjoyed, and that's evident in not only the scores that the show was able to rack up, being the highest rated out of anything in the Sonic movie universe, but also it was Paramount's biggest premiere ever, and that is in the company of something like all of their different Star Trek shows, and also Halo, which is another massive gaming franchise that some people would probably argue at one point in history was bigger than Sonic. This is a big deal. Sonic is a big popular franchise right now and has a big hold on not just kids, but a bunch of different age demographics, so that's a big appeal as well. It hasn't really stumbled yet. It hasn't messed up in a way that, their Transformers franchise has recently, specifically with critics. It's made money, but we see that the trajectory is slowly going down film by film. I expect that to continue with their new animated movie coming out soon. Also, Ninja Turtles, Power Rangers, all this different stuff that they have IPs to, they're just kind of stumbling a bit with their whole 80s appeal. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't change anything. In fact, I think Skydance's thing might be to push Sonic even further than what Paramount has planned right now. Of course, there are more plans for more films beyond 3. We know this. Probably more TV shows as well. In what form, how they're going to do that, we'll see. But I just honestly expect them to really lean into the Sonic brand. If anybody's worried about them stopping this or putting an end to this output or rebooting or doing something completely different, I wouldn't worry. I don't think there's going to be a lot of studio interference where they're going to be telling them what to do. I think it's going to be okay, everyone. Honestly, I think that this might make people a little more chill than Sony, because Sony has such a bad rep around them with all of their Spider-Man or non-Spider-Man movies, their Ghostbusters films, their awful animated movies outside of Spider-Verse. They aren't the greatest studio, so there's a lot more fear around that, and I read that in the comments when we dropped our last video talking about this. But I think because there's more mystery around Skydance, I think a lot of people are going to be more indifferent towards this happening. Hell, I'm not even super well versed in Skydance, which is why I'm not going to be getting super critical about them. I've only consumed a few of their different forms of media, whether that be a movie or a game. But another one thing is that it's good that this happened at the end of the day. Paramount needed to sell, because if they didn't sell, or merge rather, they weren't going to survive as a company. They would just simply be no more. And if that happened, Sonic wouldn't really have a home for movies and shows and all of that, in the form of live action, of course. Doesn't mean there would never be any Sonic movies or shows again, but it would take another studio coming along and scooping up the rights to the franchise to continue it in some way. And even if that did happen, it probably wouldn't be allowed to exist in the same state that it is right now. They'd probably have to reboot. But now that they've merged, Paramount is a lot more safe, a lot more secure. Of course, it's not 100% official yet. This is just an agreement in principle, essentially, but it's essentially confirmed as well. So it's going to happen, and Paramount will now be merged with Skydance Media, which is exciting. I think that this is an exciting prospect. I wouldn't, like I said, get scared or worried. I don't think that much is going to change, honestly, which is why I'm not freaking out or going crazy here. Of course, I should also clarify, this doesn't extend to the main series. Sonic is still ultimately owned by Sega. So stuff like games and television series in the form of animation and stuff like that, merchandise, largely unaffected. In fact, almost entirely unaffected by this transaction. The branch of it that they sold off to Paramount, being those film/TV rights, that is no longer theirs. That's been sold off. They're not in control of that. That's completely owned by a different company, being Paramount. So it's really up to them to see what happens with it, and we're gonna see what happens with it after Sonic Movie 3, and that's gonna be a massive deciding factor. The success of that will determine where we go from here, and of course, you know, we're gonna be talking about that, but we're not gonna get into that in this video. This was entirely dedicated to talking about the Skydance merger, and this is where I really pass it off to you guys and ask what you think. What do you think about Paramount officially agreeing to merge with Skydance Media? Is this good? Are you happy this happened, or do you just kind of wish that there was no change? Do you think this is good for the brand? No? Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. I'd love to know what you guys have to say. Feel free to follow my social media links, my Twitter and Instagram in the description below. You can follow those, my things on my life feature, and all things Sonic the Hedgehog. If you're looking for a way to support the channel, you can become a channel member, get your name at the end of every single video that we release, and you can also join our Patreon for behind the scenes and early look at videos. But most importantly, if you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed. This is the number one station on YouTube for all things Sonic. Whether it's video games, TV shows, movies, comics, merchandise, and more, we talk about it all. I told you guys it was going to be a busy week. This was something I already had to talk about, but we're going to see if more comes very soon. As we know, Summer Games Fest is happening, so we're going to keep our eye on that. And of course, that movie 3 trailer is always in our sights. But until then, I love you guys so much, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
And be right by the motherfucking seaside, dog. Everything I see, I got a dream. I thought these leaves would go and take me out the dark. I know everything I wanted to follow with me, yeah.